Alright, welcome back to a new and improved episode with our new mic and new mic settings. So today we're going to be covering artillery weaponry, or artillery ammunition I should say. Starting off with the Arrow 4. The basic Arrow 4 ammunition is a 75 meter AoE that does 90% of the weapon damage. So it actually does considerable damage at extreme ranges in a cluster. So an Arrow 4 can really mess up a clump of mechs. It's actually not that effective against a single mech. It does do a lot of stability damage, but the damage itself is not that significant against a single target. It's just whenever mechs are close together that it's super effective. Arrow 5 ammo, I have no idea what Arrow 5 ammo is. I've never run across it. I don't know how it works. It says it's some kind of Arrow 4 ammo that has 2 shots per bin, but I've never seen it. The fast cam ammo, as well as the fast cam Inferno, and I wasn't able to find it on the wiki, but there's also fast cam Acid. So the Arrow, all of the fast cam ammo from the Arrow is IFF. So you can run through it. Sorry about the car driving by with the loud muffler and everything. So you can run through it without it going off on your own units. That's true for the fast cam, for the fast cam Inferno, and I'm pretty sure for the fast cam Acid as well. But the thing is, the single arrow drops 60 mines in a cluster, and it's actually a tighter cluster than if you're using, for example, mortars or LRMs to drop mines. So it's really good for example, if you're in an ambush convoy mission, just dropping it on the path they're going to go, and they take tons of damage. So this is a good point, since I'm going to be covering the Arrow fast cam as well as the mortar fast cam on this episode. So mines, it's really super effective if you stack the same kind of mine a ton of times. So if you have 300 fast cam mines on a single hex, and the mech runs over it and that mine triggers, then all of those mines are going to do a ton of damage. However, if you have fast cam Acid, fast cam Inferno all in the same hex, whenever a mech runs over that hex, it rolls to trigger the first type. If that triggers, that's it. So if you've got 100 of each, only 100 mines will ever trigger on a single hex. If you have 300, again, this is way out there. 300 mines per hex is insane. But just to make the numbers even. So if you have 300 of the same kind of mine, and they trigger, then it's going to blow up 300 mines, as far as I understand. And if there's 100 of 3 different kinds of mines, you will never get more than 100 triggering at a single hex. So it'll roll to see if the 100 fast cam mines trigger. If those don't trigger, it'll roll to see if the Acid triggers. If those don't trigger, then it'll roll to see if the Inferno triggers. And while layering different types of mines has, increased chance that a mine will trigger, if you're trying to really tear up the legs of a mech, it's best to just layer the same kind of ammunition, the same kind of mines on top of each other. Even IFF mines and non-IFF mines don't stack. So if you drop augmented Thunder LRMs and Thunder LRMs on the same stack, or on the same hex, only one or the other will trigger. But if you drop nothing but Thunder, or nothing but Thunder Augmented, then all of them will trigger. So, I actually just saw, I know this is a crazy mind tangent, but I just saw an episode Baradol released, where he thought that it was most effective to just drop each instance of mines across the entire battlefield. Which is a way to do it, because it does, maximize the number of hexes covered with mines. But if he had just dropped the same kind of mine in the same kind of place at this, over and over again, as long as it was the same kind of mine, then as far as I understand, it will always trigger all of them, as long as it's just a single type of mine. You can tell, I'm pretty sure whenever you hover over, it shows a list of the different types of mine and how many you're going to run over whenever you have a move, whenever you're issuing a move order or a sprint order or a jump order and you hover over a mine hex, it'll tell you how many are going to potentially detonate. If it only says a single type, then only that type will detonate. So if it detonates, all of them will detonate. But if it's showing 3 different kinds, then those are going to trigger separately. So now that that tangent's completely taken care of, fast cam mines is just damage. They are notable for having the highest mine trigger chance that I'm aware of, at 70% instead of the regular 50%. But they only do 3 mine damage apiece, as compared to augmented thunders that do 4 and regular fast cam that I'm pretty sure does 5. I know regular thunder LRMs do 5, but regular thunder LRMs have 1 mine per missile, and augmented have 2, and that's all in the LRM video. But I just wanted to cover that briefly at the start of this episode, because that's something that confuses some people. Like, I've dropped so many mines on this, area. Why are their legs not blowing off? If they're different types of mines, only one type can trigger at a time. So, moving on. The Arrow 4 fast cam, 60 mines, and each one does 3 damage, but they have a really high trigger chance. The Inferno, again, IFF system, really high trigger chance, but this time it does 2 mine damage and 2 mine heat. So, this is kind of counterproductive. It's good if you're trying to overheat a target and they're taking leg damage and heat damage, but just from the standpoint of I'm trying to destroy targets as fast as I can or as efficiently as I can with the weapons at hand, if you're doing heat damage to an enemy in a minefield, it's reducing their move distance, which means less mines will detonate on following turns. So Inferno fast cam is weird, because it kind of, by running over a bunch of mines and getting a bunch of heat, the mech then is slowed down for the next turn and can't run over as many mines, making the mines less effective. Then again, I'm pretty sure there's Arrow 4 Acid fast cam. I didn't see it on the wiki, but I'm pretty sure I've seen it before. I'm assuming it also has a 70% trigger chance and just does acid instead of heat damage. Moving on, we have Guided Arrow 4, which is basically the Artemis. It is the Artemis. Requires Artemis 4 control system and gives you +1 accuracy, +1 evasion ignore, and +1 direct accuracy. So very straightforward. If you have Artemis 4, it's really, really good. If you don't have Artemis 4, you can't use it. So there you go. And then the Inferno, this is the Arrow 4 that's just Inferno, not the Inferno mine, is really strong against any mechs that are remotely close together. Because if you land that shot anywhere in the neighborhood of the clump of mechs, you're going to do a ton of heat damage to all of them. And, as you see here, it has a duration of 4 turns and 15 strength. So that means you hit them once, you do 30 damage. You do 30 heat damage. Okay? So that's not enough to overheat them on its own. But then for 4 more turns, they're taking 15 heat per turn. Which means if you hit them turn after turn, they're getting the 30 heat that you hit them with, plus the 15 heat from the turn before, or, maybe another 15 heat from the turn before that, or maybe another 15 heat from the turn before that, and all of a sudden you're at 75 heat in a single turn from a single mech, or actually from a single weapon system. So the Inferno Arrow 4 is really, really strong. And, it's got 75 meter AoE. And it does damage. But, if you're firing the Inferno Arrow 4, you're not trying to do damage. You're trying to do heat damage. And it is very, very effective at doing that. Now, obviously, the downside to Arrow 4s is they have limited ammo. Per ton, you're only going to get 5 shots. So, I mean, 2 tons of ammo, that's enough for a standard 10-round mission, but if the mission starts running longer, like if you have crazy amounts of target density and just several lances to deal with, and they're all assault mechs, then your arrow's probably going to run out of ammo pretty quick. But it's not nearly as bad as like a, rotary AC-20 or anything. Alright, so long toms are kind of like Arrow 4s in the sense that it's a really big missile. Long toms do significant damage and a ton of stability damage. They have a 105 meter AoE. So, yeah, even if you miss a little bit, you're still going to hit with the long tom. I mean, again, the Arrow 4 was, I believe, 75 meters, so this is 30% more than the actually, no, that's not even the way that area works, is it? Because if the radius increases by 30%, then the area itself, maths. Yeah, just, it's a massive area, and you're going to do tons of AoE damage. I should have mentioned this with the Arrow 4 as well, but the problem with them, the problem I see with them is you're almost certainly, once the fight really starts, going to hit your own units as well. And I'm not a big fan of friendly fire, which is part of the reason why the Arrow 4 mines are so good, is because the IFF jammer, or the IFF interface, where the mines don't explode on your own units. Moving on, we have the Long Tom Davy Crockett, which, if you have nukes enabled, you will run across this. I never do, because I don't like having my assault mechs one-shot from, off-screen. It's just, yeah. Plus 2,000 weapon damage dealt. 1,250 area of effect damage. Within 360 meters. It's just, I don't find it fun. And then there's the Inferno Long Tom, which, similar to the Arrow 4, is a massive AoE that has a 4-turn duration and a 15 burn strength. But this one does 50 heat. So, the Arrow 4 is great at overheating targets over the course of a couple of rounds of shooting them. This thing can overheat a target in 1 turn, and then keep them overheated. But yeah, other than that, the Long Tom and the Arrow 4 are very similar weapons. The Long Tom is just the heavier, bigger version of the Arrow 4, and it also does not have any Artemis ammo to increase the accuracy. Alright, now we move on to Sniper Artillery, and Sniper Artillery has a 75 meter AoE, just like the Arrow 4. It is a slightly lower damage, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, I'm sure you will in the comments, but I'm pretty sure the Sniper Artillery does less damage than the Arrow 4. However, it cannot get intercepted by AMS because it's ballistic rather than missile. And then the Sniper Inferno is essentially the exact same as the Arrow 4 Inferno, except, again, it's ballistic instead of missile, so it can't be shot down by AMS, and it takes a ballistic hardpoint instead of a missile hardpoint. And then the Sniper Shaped Charge, again, since it's not a missile, there is no Artemis 4 for it. However, since it's ballistic, and ballistic is good at critting, they had to include ammo that is good at critting. So, +1 accuracy, double crit chance. Shaped charges are fun. Alright, Thumper Artillery is a slightly smaller Sniper Artillery. It does a 60 meter AoE instead of a 75 meter AoE. The Fast Cam drops 20 mines per projectile, and has a 50% trigger chance. But it does 6 mine damage when they explode. So, again, just for reference, the Thunder LRMs do 5 mine damage, the Augmented Thunder LRMs do 4 mine damage, but drop 2 mines per missile. And this drops 20 mines per projectile. So a single Thumper round is very similar, pretty much the same, to an LRM-20 firing Thunder. It's just the ammo will last longer. The Inferno Thumper does 25 heat damage, but it still has, as far as the wiki says, I haven't tested this in-game, but it still has the same burn strength and duration as the Arrow and the Long Tom. So it's very good. It only does 25 heat on initial impact. However, it's the burn duration and the burn strength is so strong that if you just keep lobbing these things, you're going to overheat everyone in the area. Nukes, again, I do not play with them, but yeah, they're massive, massive damage in a huge AoE. And then we have the Shape Charge, which once again is +1 accuracy, double crit. Alright, now we have the Swiss Army knife of Roguetech, the Mortar system. So mortars come, I believe, in 4, 6, or 8 per weapon. And yeah, they do AoE, 45 meter AoE, so smaller than, for example, a sniper artillery or an arrow or whatever, except you're firing 4 to 8 projectiles per weapon system instead of 1. The acid causes the targets to take 1% more damage per mortar they get hit with. So again, if you're firing the Mortar 4, and mortars, since they're doing AoE damage, are pretty much guaranteed to hit. So it's going to do 1% bonus damage per mortar that hits. So if you have a Mortar 8, it's going to do 8% more damage. If you have 4 Mortar 8s, then you're going to be doing 32% more damage. In addition to that, it does bonus damage to armor, so it's much better against fresh targets, and minus damage to structure, so it's actually pretty good for crit hunting. Moving on, we have the Airburst. So, first of all, Airburst is special because you cannot fire mortars at aerial targets. VTOLs and lambs that are in flight mode. You cannot fire mortars against them. However, you can fire Airburst at them. Airburst gives you bonus accuracy against them as well, but they're still useful, unlike the other VTOL targeting weapons that I've covered before. Airburst mortars are really good because it splits the damage into 4 instances. So if you have a target open and you're just trying to crit them out, and you drop a bunch of Airburst, like a Mortar 8 dropping Airburst, that's 32 instances of damage from a single weapon. That's really good for crit hunting. And if you're just trying to splash for, 5 hit points, 1 hit point, whatever, on a single area, you're probably going to hit it. Also, mortars don't have the best clustering, so keep that in mind. Anytime you have mortars firing, they're going to splash everywhere. Their clustering is, I think, the lowest in the game. Then we have Fastcam, which, just like Thunder LRMs, have a 5 mine damage. They're 8 mines per projectile, unlike the 1 per Thunder missile. So, if you're firing a Mortar 4, you're still firing 32 mines, as compared to the 20 mines from an LRM-20. Mortar 8, you're dropping 64 mines, which is the equivalent of 3 LRM-20s. So, you get a lot more volume of mines with Fastcam, but they only have a 35% trigger chance. So, they also scatter a lot more than LRMs, or Thunder LRMs do. So you have to keep that in mind whenever you're using them. You really have to saturate an area to really take the legs off of mechs. But if you have, 3 or 4 Mortar 8s, you're dropping so many mines that even with a 35% trigger chance, you're going to do a lot of leg damage. Especially if you drop the Fastcam over multiple rounds into the same spot. Fastcam Acid. So Fastcam Acid is really, really strong. It only has 4 mines per projectile instead of the 8 mines of the regular Fastcam. However, it has a 44% trigger chance, which is a little bit higher, and it has 8 mine damage. However, it's increased by 50% against armor. So that means you're doing 12 damage per mine to armor, which is really significant since whenever a unit first breaches their armor, so if they're running over a minefield, the second their armor hits 0 and they take the first point of structure damage, they stop. Even if they're facing an awful direction. And so they're not... Fastcam Acid is not good at actually taking the legs off of a mech, as far as, taking them completely out of the game. But causing them to stop in their tracks and melting their armor very, very quickly. Fastcam Acid is really strong. So ideally, what you do is you take Fastcam Acid, you drop it straight on top of the enemies. Then the next round, you drop regular Fastcam offset from the acid between the enemies and your position. So first they run through the acid mines, which melts off the armor and gets them down to structure. Then they run through the regular mines and their legs blow off. That's the way I've used them in the past. I find it very, very effective. But yes, some people like mines, some people don't. I'm just saying, if you're going to use mines, especially with mortars, that is a very effective way to do it. Flare mortars are weird. They do 1 damage, so they're what are the LRMs called? I cannot remember what the LRMs are called off the top of my head, but they do 1 damage guaranteed to everyone in the area. Which is kind of bad when you're firing 8 instead of the 20 from an LRM 20. But they also, if they hit, do better damage than the LRMs firing the swarm missiles. That's what they're called. If they hit, they do more damage than the swarm missiles. If they miss, they do less damage than the swarm missiles. But the important thing with the flares is that they increase the visibility and sensor signature of everyone hit. Meaning that if there's a bunch of little stealth mechs running around that you're having trouble locking your weapons onto, if you drop a single round of flares, all of a sudden they're going to light up your sensors and you can just take them down easily. I find flare mortar ammo to be more effective at taking out stealth targets than sensor lock. And sensor lock you have to commit a pilot ability to, as compared to mortar flare where you can just drop a ton of ammo in and just use it whenever. Moving on. We have guided mortar ammo. So this reduces the damage from a hit by 10%. However, it increases the accuracy indirectly by 1 and directly by 3. And it does an extra 3 AoE damage even if you miss. So against those really hard to hit targets, mortar guided is amazing. If you don't directly hit and do the, regular damage, well, slightly less than regular damage you're hoping for, you still do 3 damage. Which is, I believe, the same as the improved swarm missiles. Don't quote me on that, but yes, it's very effective. Very, very effective. Mortar Inferno. So Inferno mortars are basically like if you take Inferno SRMs, make them kind of bad against a single target, but make them hit everyone. So it's a 45 AoE, and this is per mortar. So this, if you're firing a mortar 8, you have to keep in mind everything here is multiplied by 8. So you're doing 2 damage and 2 heat damage to anyone hit. So again, with a mortar 8, that's 16 damage and 16 heat damage. In addition, if you hit, you do an additional 2 heat damage per mortar that hits. So that's a potential, once again, for 32 heat damage if you hit all 8 mortars from a mortar 8. Then they have 2 burn duration, so for 2 turns, they burn a 2 burn strength per mortar that hit them. So again, a Mortar 8 can generate an extra 16 heat per turn for 2 turns. In addition to the potentially 32 heat you just did. And that's if you have a single Mortar 8. If you stack Mortar 8s, you can do stupid heat to an area very easily. Now, I have noticed that with these small heat instances like this, especially noticeable with Hydra, where you're sometimes doing less than 1 heat per missile, there's a weird thing that was built into Roguetech to prevent the just overheat cheese, where you just spam heat on everyone and nobody moves. So to combat that, the modders implemented a interesting little heat mechanic. I'll cover it in more detail in a separate video, but sometimes if you only hit with a little bit of small instances of heat, it'll actually reduce their current heat. And this isn't a bug, this is actually a gameplay mechanic that was implemented specifically because before it was implemented, it was way too easy to just overheat literally everyone on the battlefield and then just shoot them one at a time as you keep them overheated. Like, you only really, if you wanted to play it the quote easiest way, you just brought a bunch of heat weapons and a single mech that did a bunch of pinpoint, and then you just shut everyone down and went one by one and just killed them. Obviously, that's not the idea. That's not the vision of the game that most people have. So to combat that being a possibility to even accidentally do, the modders implemented this heat threshold system. It is based on your cooling, so firing small instances of heat against a mech running single heat sinks is much, much more effective than firing them at somebody running clan doubles. So just keep that in mind whenever you're dropping a lot of small instances. So if you have like a single Mortar 4, if they're almost overheating, don't be surprised if you drop that single Mortar 4 on them and then their heat goes down a little bit. So just keep that in mind that is a thing that can happen. Now, smoke mortar ammo. Smoke mortar ammo is the opposite of the flare. When you drop smoke on a target, it's like chaff, where the target's accuracy is reduced. But it also defends them because they're obscured by the smoke, so they gain 1 defense. Their sight is reduced, so they can't see very well, very far. And their visibility is reduced, so you can't see them very well. Meaning that you can use this both offensively and defensively. For example, the primary use that I've found for smoke mortar is actually not on the enemies. It's once I've completed an objective and I want to escape, it's really actually pretty good for dropping on my own units on the way to the evac zone to reduce the damage I'm taking on the way out. I haven't used it in my playthrough. I haven't gotten it, but yes, in my opinion, it's actually more effective to drop on your own units to reduce the damage they're taking when you're running away, rather than trying to use it on the enemies. Obviously, if you're trying to fight, don't drop it on your own units, because an accuracy reduction of 2 is actually very significant. But you don't care about the accuracy reduction if you're running away, which is why I use it like that. Yeah, so that's it for mortar ammo, and we will move on. Alright, just to get this out of the way real quick, Thunderbolt 5s have 12 shots per ton. So if you're running a single Thunderbolt 5, you only really need 1 ton. Thunderbolt 10s have 6 missiles per ton. So if you're running a single Thunderbolt 10, you only really need 2 tons of ammo. Thunderbolt 15s, however, have 4 shots per ton. So you really, like, my go-to rule is I want at least 10 rounds worth of ammo. Because defend bases and capture bases, like, they tend to run 10 rounds at least. Attack and defends and escort missions, often run more than 10 rounds, especially at higher skull ratings. And battles or assassinates, depending on how many enemy lances they are, they can run 20 plus rounds, possibly, depending on what you're bringing and what you're up against. So 4 shots per ton is not very much. You have to keep that in mind. And that brings us to the Thunderbolt 20, which has 3 shots per ton, which in my opinion makes it better than the Thunderbolt 15. Because you're bringing almost as many tons of ammunition for the 20 as you are for the 15, but you're getting much more bang for your buck. So the 20 is a little bit heavier, but the Thunderbolt 15 is doing less damage. So in my opinion, Thunderbolt 10s and 5s are good. Thunderbolt 20s are good, especially if you want a single missile pinpoint. And Thunderbolt 15s are, in my opinion, actually the worst Thunderbolts in the game. But that's just because of the amount of tonnage you have to dedicate to ammunition to make them viable. And you're better off just using that tonnage for a bigger weapon system or other weapon systems. Like, if you drop a Thunderbolt 15 down to a Thunderbolt 10, that lets you bring other weapon systems. Or maybe even a second Thunderbolt 10, depending on how much tonnage you have had left to begin with. So, that being said, let's move on to the specialties. Alright, so the Deadfire Quicksell is, well, I mean, it's a Deadfire missile, so it does bonus damage at an accuracy penalty. And it has reduced range brackets, cannot be fired indirectly, and is less likely to be intercepted by AMS. The weird thing is it's on a Thunderbolt. So, this is the one type of Quicksell object, weapon, munitions, whatever, that I actually think is good. Like, unironically, I feel like if you have a Thunderbolt mech, it's worth bringing a ton of Deadfire Quicksell ammo just in case somebody gets inside of your minimum range, because the bonus damage from a Thunderbolt to the face at short range is totally worth the -3 accuracy. I mean, if you don't have the reduced range brackets and you're firing at or below minimum range, the accuracy penalty is so much worse than 3. So only having a 3 accuracy penalty instead of the, I think it's like 8 or something that you have for firing at minimum range or below minimum range makes this worth it. Now, you could just be strategic and never let your Thunderbolt carriers get that close to enemies, but then there's always those filthy little stealthy backstabbers. So, Deadfire Quicksell ammo is actually worth having sometimes, depending on the situations. Guided. 2 evasion ignore, 1 accuracy, and 2 accuracy if you're firing directly. That's really good. The -25% damage is not so good. So, the way I play, I do tend to build my mechs a little on the hotter side. So usually, if I don't have a good hit chance on anyone, I'd rather just not fire the weapon system rather than take a 25% penalty and be more likely to hit. And if you already have a good hit chance, you don't really need 2 evasion ignore and +2 accuracy. So, this would be amazing, absolutely amazing, if it didn't have the damage penalty. But the fact that it requires Artemis and it has a damage penalty makes me honestly think the Deadfire Quicksell ammo is better than the Guided Thunderbolt ammo. But, I mean, your mileage may vary. Sometimes people like having the, reduced damage in exchange for the high accuracy. Then we have high explosive ammo. So, if you're going to bring bonus accuracy ammo, bring high explosive. You get +2 accuracy. You don't get the evasion ignore, but you have AoE, which is, basically evasion ignore, because it doesn't matter how evasive they are, they still take damage. Kinetic kill. I have never run across this stuff, but, yeah. Apparently they're armor penetration missiles. You You cannot fire directly, but they have a double through armor crit chance, bonus to range, bonus 50% damage dealt to armor, and a little bit of damage variance. As well as apparently reduced explosive potential, so they're less likely to blow up too. So I don't see a downside other than you can't fire indirectly. Like, yeah, the damage decreases at close range, but you shouldn't be firing thunderbolts at close range anyway. Unless something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. So I don't see a downside. I've never come across this stuff, but if I did, I would happily use it. And then the Thunderbolt 5 nuke. Again, I don't play with nukes, but as per every other nuke, insane damage, massive AoE, yeah, it's a nuke. What do you expect? Alright, so going through and making sure I didn't miss anything, the Thunderbolts also have feint ammo, which might be pronounced feint, I don't know. Somebody corrected my pronunciation of Sabo. Yeah, Sabo, I think it was. I said Sabbath, but apparently it's Sabo, just to set the record straight. I don't know whether this is feint, or feign, or something else. I don't know. Words with, silent letters isn't exactly common in English. Unless it's words we stole from other languages. In any case, so feint ammo is -1 accuracy, but 20% less likely to be shot down by AMS. So, great against Nidhogg's and other stuff carrying AMS Mark IIs and flares. But, yeah. So, every Thunderbolt has feint ammo. High explosive, I realized the only things that increase with high explosive as you climb up from Thunderbolts 5, 10s, 15s, and 20s is the stability damage and the hit damage. So if you don't hit with the weapon, if you're just using high explosive to do splash, Thunderbolt 5s do the same amount of AoE as Thunderbolt 20s, as per the wiki. So it's a bigger radius if you're using a bigger missile, but the damage itself is the same. So if you're just trying to hit one target with AoE damage, and you miss, your Thunderbolt 20 high explosive missing is going to be the same as the Thunderbolt 5 missing. However, if you're trying to do damage to a cluster of mechs, the Thunderbolts, as they get bigger, will be able to deal with a more and more spread out cluster. And again, the stability damage is greatly increased as you get bigger. Then the Thunderbolt 20 apparently also has specialty ammo. The MIRV, M-I-R-V, MIRV, sure, which is just airburst, which is cool. I mean, airburst splits into 4 fragments, so it gives you more damage, damage instances. It's less likely to be shot down by AMS, but if you shoot too short, then you're going to be taking a 20% damage penalty. And the shot doesn't separate if it's within 120 meters. And then there's NIMP, N-E-M-P. Yeah, apparently it's like the... Oh, what is this? Haywire Narc. The accuracy reduction, movement reduction, sinking the heat is reduced, and it does 50 heat damage, but it does no damage. Like, there's no actual damage, but it does massive heat damage, and it does AoE heat. And I didn't see this on the wiki for any of the other Thunderbolts, just the 20. So, yeah, that sounds fun. Now, moving on to the Thermobolts. Now, the reason I'm talking about these differently is because, as you go up, the heat goes up significantly. So, they all have +2 accuracy. Every single one of them has the +2 accuracy, which is cool. They all do -80% damage, which is not so cool, but if you're using Thermobolts, you're not really trying to do damage anyway. So the heat starts off as 5 heat within 30 meters, 5 AoE damage, and 10 AoE heat. and then the target heat sinking efficiency is reduced by 5. I'm pretty sure that's 5%. So Thunderbolt 5s, unless you're using multiple of them, are pretty weak. I honestly don't even know if the heat sinking reduction stacks between missiles, so maybe it does. Maybe hitting them with 3 or 4 different Thunderbolt 5s would increase, or, would cause the heat sinking efficiency to be reduced by 15-20%, whatever. But, yeah, the better option is just going with the higher missiles, the larger Thermobolts. So you can see Thermobolt 5, with its 12 shots per ton, is literally doubled. Like, everything. The area of effect damage is doubled. The area of effect heat is doubled. The number of shots is halved, but you're able to do the same amount for each ton of ammo. So it's the same amount of heat, it's the same amount of area of effect damage per ton of ammo between the different weapon systems. And then you move up to the Thunderbolt 15, and Thunderbolt 15, as expected, does what a Thunderbolt 10 and a Thunderbolt 5 together would do. And the Thunderbolt 20 is twice as effective as the Thermobolt 10. The Thermobolt 10 has 6 shots, the Thermobolt 20 has 3 shots. So as far as ammunition goes, per ton, the Thunderbolts all have the same effect per ton of ammo. You're going to deal 20 heat damage, you're going to do 20 AoE damage, and you're going to do 40 AoE heat damage, while reducing the target's hit by heat sinking efficiency by 20%. The only difference is you do that 3 times over the course of 3 rounds with the Thermobolt 20, and it takes 12 rounds to get the same effect from the Thermobolt, or Thermobolt 5. So you're getting the same effect as you move up faster. Like, literally, it's just faster. So if you have the option of bringing a larger Thermobolt, and Thunderbolt system, and you're like, oh, well, I'm only going to have enough ammo for 6 shots of Thermobolt. Well, if you're going to shoot 6 times with a Thermobolt 20, you're doing literally the same thing you would with Thermobolt 5s over the course of long... I hope I'm getting across what I'm trying to say. So, each turn for 3 turns, as compared to every 4 turns for 12 turns. So it takes 4 turns to do the same with a Thunderbolt 5 that you would do with a single Thunderbolt 20. So whenever it comes to Thermobolt ammo, the ammo count per ton doesn't matter. They all do the same thing. All that matters is how big of a warhead can you squeeze in, how big of a weapon system can you squeeze into the mech. Because whenever it comes to Thunderbolts, especially the Thermobolt missiles, like the other Thunderbolt types, okay, there's a little bit of benefits here and there to the smaller ones, but when it comes to Thermobolts, if you can drop 20s, dropping 20s is better than dropping 15s or 10s or 5s. Just period, it's just better. So, even if you don't have enough ammo to last for as many rounds as the smaller Thermobolts, you're getting the same effect faster. Also, because of the way that the heat calculations work, and the heat sinking threshold, where hitting mechs with good heat efficiency is less effective, the smaller the heat instances are, the less effective they are at overheating mechs with good cooling. But if you have a single big instance of heat damage, that's actually going to be more effective. So again, I'm going to do a separate video on heating, on overheating targets and the way heat's applied to mechs. But just keep in mind that 40 area of effect heat damage and 20 heat damage if you hit, that's 60 heat damage in a single turn. Which is far, far more effective than doing 15 heat damage per turn. Especially since Thermobolts don't have the heat stick around. They do not have the, target generates extra heat for X number of turns. They just reduce the target's heat sinking efficiency, which is actually better against mechs with great cooling. The more heat sinks the mech has, the more effective the heat sink reduction is. But against mechs with weak cooling, which are the ones that are more susceptible to overheating anyway, it's actually more effective to have higher heat damage than to have the heat sinking efficiency. Unless you're against clanners that, have terrible heat efficiency because they're firing 200 heat worth of weapons every round, in which case, yeah, the heat sinking efficiency is amazing. I mean, I would much rather have the heat sinking efficiency against clan mechs than I would the generates heat per turn that other thermal weapons have. And finally, the Narc Beacon. Not because it's artillery, but because I just reminded myself that I didn't cover it yet whenever I was talking about the Thunderbolt 20 ammo. So, Narc Beacons, whenever you hit a target with them, they counter ECM up to 8, which is amazing. They give +2 accuracy against the target, and a bonus +2 accuracy with missiles. So you're getting +4 accuracy with missiles. It reduces the target's stealth, ECM, or mimetic effects by 1. So it counters their stealth by 1, in addition to countering their ECM by 8. It makes them more visible, and it makes them more easy to detect. So, if you have a Narc Beacon, even late game, it doesn't matter how late in the game you get. Narc Beacons are good against stealth targets and against targets that have crazy electronic warfare. It doesn't matter whether it's a flea or an atlas. If it has stealth, if it has massive amounts of a warfare suite, ECM, and what's cool is even if there's active ECM that's overlapping and covering a mech with a lot of ECM, if you hit him with a Narc, it cuts through that. It really cuts through that. And if you're supporting it with any kind of a missile boat, then, yeah, a single shot with a Narc will just make it so easy to just melt through a target with missiles, especially early game. Like, I can't stress enough how good Narc Beacons are early. And that brings us to Narc ECMs, which is better against stealth targets. But what it does is it kind of blinds them a little bit. So it's most effective against backline targets. Guys with thunderbolts and mortars and arrows and long toms. If you can get a Narc ECM on them, you can potentially deny them the ability to shoot your other mechs. And if you're doing it with a light or medium mech that's right in their face, then they're not going to be able to fire pretty much at all. So the ECM Narc is really effective on a stealthy little fast mech that can get into the enemy's back lines and cause havoc. The explosive Narc is weird. It really doesn't make sense to me because you don't bring a Narc to do damage, but I mean, I guess it's the same as flipping your AMS to machine gun mode or laser mode. It's an option that you have. It is really, really good at critting, so I'll give it that. But, like, I mean, I guess if you have a spare ton and a Narc launcher, why not? Haywire Narcs are amazing late game. Early game, they're, okay. They do reduce the enemy's accuracy, which is always good. They do reduce the amount of evasion that they get from movement, which is always good. And early game, the 15% movement reduction can really, really slow down a light mech. Late game against an Atlas or something, the 15% reduction, oh no, they moved 3 hexes instead of 4. I mean, that's a 25% reduction. But, I mean, rounding. So, It's not really that great late game, but, I mean, still, making an assault mech have 1 evasion instead of 2, having their evasion is pretty cool. But the big reason why it's so good late game is because it impairs heat sinking by 20% for 2 turns. And as far as I've been able to figure out, I think that stacks. Because whenever I've hit a target 2 turns in a row with the Haywire Narc, their sinking has gone from, okay, that's really bad, to, oh wow, they can't fire anything without immediately shutting down. So, I will swear by Narc launchers up and down for, all my days, but they're good. They're really good. The eye beacon I've never come across. Increased range bracket grants visibility and counters ECM by 12. The same +2 accuracy and +4 with missiles. Counters stealth ECM and mimetic effects by 2. Makes them easier to see. It lasts for 4 rounds. It's just, apparently Narc eye beacons are just better Narc beacons. Okay, I guess because it's only 5 shots per ton instead of 10. But, yeah. It's good. Sticky bombs. Sticky bombs are weird. So, yeah, it's like artillery, but it's a narc. Moving on. The Snark Beacon. Yeah. It's just a worse Narc Beacon. I don't know. It's weird because it says manufacturer clan, and usually clan tech is pretty good, but it has the same ECM counter. It has half the accuracy for non-missiles. It has 75% of the accuracy for missiles, and it only has half the making targets easier to detect. Oh no, I'm sorry, a quarter of the making targets easier to detect. So, and it has less shots. It's just objectively worse. At first, I thought it was a quick sell item. Then I saw it said manufacturer clan. That's just weird. In any case, that was your artillery. That makes me really wonder. It says with missiles, so I'm pretty sure it's just with missiles. But it makes me kind of wonder if the Narc Beacon has that extra bonus accuracy for mortars, or if the modders intend to at any point include bonus accuracy for mortars. But no, I guess that doesn't make sense, because most missiles in the Roguetech universe are smart missiles. They're target designation missiles. They're, better. They're not just, Deadfire's dumb missiles. They just fire. That's why they're easier, or they're hard to get shot down by AMS. Whereas every other type of missile in the Roguetech universe is guided, is a smart missile. So maybe that's why artillery, the mortars don't get the bonus accuracy, but missiles do. Regardless, that's been the episode covering artillery ammunition and Narc beacons. And I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week.